The meeting to order. First up, Bill Levine, December 2023 sales tax chart.
Great. Thank you, committee. Again, my name is Bill Levine. I'm a revenue analyst in the budget office. To talk briefly about December 2023 sales tax. So last month, we collected a total of $22.1 million. That was an increase of about 1.65 million compared to December 2022, so compared to 1 year ago. That represents growth of about 8%. So it was a good month for sales tax collections. Really, the primary reason why it was such a good month, or at least a good reason, or a significant reason why we saw such good growth. And if you see the sales tax chart, I'm not sure if you're looking at it, it's on page 4 of the packet. But December 2022 was actually not a great month. So one of the reasons we saw the relatively strong 8% growth was that we were growing over a December 2022 that was somewhat on the weak side. One of the reasons December 2022 was weaker just comes down to the calendar and how many days of Christmas shopping you have in a certain month. So as we talk about December sales tax, just a reminder that what December sales tax represent are November sales. So there was one extra day of Christmas shopping again in November 2023, which has to do with where Black Friday falls. So that was, again, part of the reason also we saw good growth was we had more days of shopping compared to a year ago, less days of Christmas shopping as measured by where Black Friday falls. Final couple of things. Another source of growth is that the Cornerstar URA expired in September 2023. So that's generating about an extra $100,000 a month in sales tax that are no longer going back to the URA per an incentive agreement. And the final thing, just in terms of sectors, I do every month analyze some of our largest taxpayers and try to look at the trends within our sales tax since it's such a big source of our revenue. We had a total of, I think it was 10 sectors that experienced growth in December, led by building materials growing almost 20%, auto dealers growing at about 10%. And a part of the reason behind that is we opened a new Tesla dealership in the last month and it's been doing really well. Industrial sales were also up about 10%, and eating and drinking places also in the range of 10%. And I think for that last one, food inflation and specifically prices at restaurants being a big part of that. In contrast, we saw 5 sectors that declined in December. So that's the end of my presentation, unless there are questions about December sales tax.
Bill, not necessarily about December itself, but just looking at the month-to-month percentage increase numbers, they're obviously a lot lower in 2023, but I'm guessing the same story for December, kind of taken out over every month. We're looking at the year-over-year increase, and we saw such significant increases in 2021, even in 2022. So it's hard to keep growing at such a fast rate. Is that why the percentages are just so lower in 2023 than they were in 2021 and 2022?
That's definitely part of it. I think the other two things I would throw in there, part of why 2022 was so strong is we had really high inflation. So as people are paying sales tax on things that have gotten a lot more expensive, you're also paying more sales tax on that. So as inflation slows, all things being equal, you should expect that sales tax will slow. And the other thing is with sort of the national economic picture with the higher interest rates, the Federal Reserve is trying to slow the economy. And I think what we're seeing is the economy is not, it's growing at about 2% if you look at GDP. So the slowing of the economy also is probably a little bit of the part of the picture of why growth has also slowed in terms of sales tax collections.
And then my other question was, it looks like October tends to be a little bit higher every year. Is there a reason for that?
There is. So one thing that you do see as a pattern, and this is not just October, but certain taxpayers are quarterly taxpayers.
Okay.
So a quarterly taxpayer would pay for the liability of their company, and this would be the liability now for July, August, and September. They would pay that in October. So October is a higher month. January will be the same thing. Your fourth quarter liability will be paid in January. So certain months for the quarterly payers are higher months. October is one of those months.
Great, appreciate that. Councilmember Lawson, any questions?
Yes, Councilmember Gardner, I do have a question, Bill. So just on the 2023, can you just tell me, I'm trying to understand, September was 0.3%, then it kind of grew a little gradually, and then we got to 8.1. Was that due to inflation? People really not really buying things, or people kind of being careful about buying things? Because it's really low in September, and I'm just trying to understand. Then it kind of just spikes up. So is that the cause of maybe why it was so low? And then it just gradually increased. And then part B to my question too is, where does online, because people were buying online. I know I bought a lot of online. So where does that kind of figure into some of these 2023? I'm not really looking at 2022.
Sure. So let me start with sort of that month-to-month variability you see in the chart. And I think one thing I would sort of caution against is looking at any one month and over focusing on a single month. And I'm going to tell you the story of September and August because they're actually correlated. So we had a large taxpayer. I guess I'm going to leave them nameless, but I think it's one of our 10 biggest taxpayers made 2 payments in the month of August. So kind of prepaid, in essence, its August liability, which meant that August number, in essence, it over reflects, I don't know if that's the right word, but the economic conditions, the amount of sales were really that's over representing the amount that was sold because it contains an extra payment from one of our largest taxpayers. The flip side is September underrepresents the amount of sales that were occurring because that one payment that normally should have been paid in September was paid early. So I prefer to look at longer term trends in a single month because weird things happen. Taxpayers pay late. That can happen. So which kind of bleeds into the answer to your second question, sort of what's driving some of this. I would say that consumer confidence, inflation, perceptions about the economy definitely do play into the amount of sales that are occurring. And I do think what you're seeing in this chart is 2 things. Inflation was higher at the beginning of the year. So yes, the growth was a little bit higher at the beginning of the year. And again, I think as the Federal Reserve tightened things and there was a lot of concern about the economy and are we going to hit a soft landing, I think consumer confidence got a little bit lower. And so you partly see that reflected both lower inflation, lower confidence in the lower amount of growth in sales tax as the year went on, as 2023 went on. Again, without focusing on one month, I do see that as a general trend across the entire year.
Are there any additional questions? Great. Thanks, Bill, for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 3A, the 2024 committee work plan, Terry Velasquez.
Yes, so if you look in your packet, you can see that we've outlined for you some of the items that we know are the basic functions and updates that we provide to the Management and Finance Policy Committee. Some of those include a monthly review of sales tax, and then some of these are more on a quarterly basis where we update you on some of our technology projects, as well as anything happening in our HR world. We also provide you information on the spring and fall supplementals, as well as metropolitan districts. And I like to remind this committee that they also serve as the internal and external audit committee. So you'll see that we have updates on the internal audit plan throughout the year, and then the formulation of the next year's audit plan each year. So we do have those functions as the basics. We also receive information for the metropolitan district updates that occur and move forward to city council. We also provide information on our BID and GID budgets. So those are kind of the basic items that we know that we're going to go through each year. And then beyond that, we really look to you all as committee members to provide any additional items that you would like to see brought forward.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Yeah, I just want to reiterate that this is kind of the, I guess, bare bones or basics of what this committee, reviews. And then, whether it's election related, campaign finance, a lot of other, kind of, well, obviously management and finance type ordinances for the city come through this committee. So, it tends to get pretty crowded, as work kind of gets going for the year. So, I think this provides a good roadmap. I did have one question, Terry,
Sure.
and probably a follow-up. February has an item, boards and commissions resolution. Can you tell me what that is?
That's something that the city attorney's office is starting to work on. It's just kind of a blanket resolution about some of the better practices for boards and commissions as it relates to some of the boards and commissions. And, I don't know if Hans is on here to talk to that, but I know that we've talked about some things we'd like to see that might make sense, like the utilization of, instead of Robert's Rules of Order, that there's another, rule of order. So I don't know if Hans is on or George, but this is one item that I think that it's just really to kind of clean that up. Hans, I see your speakers.
Yes, I am on. May I, Councilmember Gardner?
Yes, please go ahead, Hans.
It's simple. The idea is to try to unify everyone into one set of rules, one set of as much as possible, right? So we don't have too much difference between committees and boards and things of that nature. That's the intent of that work.
Okay, and part of the reason why I asked, I know council members Bergen and Jurinsky and I think others, I can't remember off the top of my head who, but have brought up in the past the idea of possibly consolidating boards and commissions. And if we were to go down that road, that probably would need to be something that would come through this committee. And I guess I can reach out to those council members and see if that's a project that they would want to kind of spearhead or take on. And I would be willing to work on it with them. But I just was curious, what that resolution specifically was, and if it's something that we should delay, in terms of what that effort might be. But it sounds like this is more something that we could just do now, and wouldn't necessarily interfere with, what proposed work that they might be working on. So, that's great. Appreciate that explanation.
And I did
oh,
have one thing to add, council member, is that we also bring forward items like debt issuances
yeah,
to the committee, and review of our various policies on investments in debt. And there will be some of that throughout this year that we're anticipating.
yep. And I did want to mention, and I had let Terry know, but just for the benefit of the committee, there's also a quarterly investment advisory committee call. And so the M&F members will also be invited to that quarterly call as well. So feel free to attend or not attend. It's at 7:30 in the morning. So if you want to nerd out about finance and investments and all that at 7:30 in the morning, please attend. I find it very informative. It's great. But if you don't feel like you need to, but I let Terry know to invite everybody. So and I just mentioned that in the context of talking about our 2024 work plan. That is the only question. That's the only question that I had on this, I guess, kind of outline for the year. Councilmember Lawson, any questions, any clarifications, anything like that on this outline for the year?
Thank you, Councilmember Gardner. So just looking at the preview, where does like a bond review or what we're doing on that front, is that, I was kind of looking through here, and I'm sorry, I haven't been on management and finance for like over probably 6 years or so, but where is that in this, and in this draft, committee work, whatever?
So we'll, in April, at least it's forecast for April, and we'll see how that comes together, but we'll review our outstanding debt with the policy committee, and then we'll review some of our debt policies as well. If there's a need for any updates, we usually bring those forward here first for review before they would move forward for adoption at council. And then the same thing, even with the opportunity to meet quarterly with our investment advisory committee, we'll also bring forward at least once this year a summary of our outstanding investments
Okay.
and any policy revisions for our investment policy.
Okay, and then Councilmember Gardner, just one other additional clarification. On this committee, do we review or does anything that has an appropriation or fiscal note, does this committee review that?
So do you want me to take that?
Please go
Or
ahead,
is it
Terry.
or is it subject, or it doesn't come through this committee? When I know there's a policy committee, but if it has a fiscal note or appropriation attached, do we review that as well on this committee?
I would say, things with a fiscal note go through all the agenda items, and Greg, you feel free to jump in as well. But what you generally see in this committee is our supplemental appropriation items that come in the spring as well as in the fall. And then you also see a pay resolution that's tied to the annual budget process. You also see the changes to our benefits plan, those being the larger expenses and appropriation of dollars. You see those coming through this committee. And then we have the special Saturday workshop for the annual budget process. And then we give updates usually in the winter and the spring council workshops on where we're at with our finances. But if there's something that's kind of the one-offs, we don't necessarily always bring it here unless there is a specific reason to.
I guess I was just specifically asking, I know we do that, but I guess I was specifically asking if a council member has any kind of ordinance that has an appropriation or fiscal note, does that come to this committee? I know the other stuff does, but does that?
I guess I would say, only through those supplemental appropriation processes. It's more consolidated than it would be individually, unless it's like a debt financing or I don't know. Greg, any other thoughts on that?
I would say that it's really one-off, something that has a fiscal note specifically from a council member. What typically comes through here is the typical stuff that she talked about. I would include service fees with that. This group gets to see service fees before the rest of council.
Yeah, I think if I may, Councilmember Lawson, not every individual ordinance that has a fiscal note or an appropriation will necessarily come through here. However, if there's like a supplemental required in the budget for it, or we're introducing a new fee, or that type of thing, then it would. So the answer is maybe.
Yeah.
If that I mean, it's hard to say, but not necessarily. Not every single fiscal note ordinance that has a fiscal note attached will come through here if it because if it doesn't require like a supplemental in the budget or a new fee or possibly a new tax or something like that, then it wouldn't necessarily come through here, I guess. Does that help a little
Thank
bit?
you, Councilmember Gardner. Sorry, I probably should know that, but I just wanted to
No,
see
you're fine.
if that happened. So thank you.
Uh-huh. Do you have any further questions on the plan?
No further questions.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Terry. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, Teresa Sedmak, renewal of financial advisory services contract.
Yes, and I just wanted to quickly add on to what Terry said and to what Councilmember Lawson asked about appropriations. We do come to the committee when there's any kind of appropriation debt that City Council has to approve. I anticipate next month coming with an ask for this committee to pass on to a study session, a financing of golf equipment, that kind of thing. Anytime we go to financing, it has to come to this committee first. So those come up as they're needed, as well as the other things that are on the work plan. So I have an information item for this committee, and it is that we just recently renewed the contract with our financial advisory firm, which is Hilltop Securities. They are really an adjunct part of our staff, and we call on them often. They do a lot of analysis for us. If we're looking at financing something, we can ask them about structuring what debt service would look like. They help us immensely when we're issuing bonds. They help us with structuring the debt. They help us put together the offering documents, the rating agency presentations. They shadow the transaction in order that they can make sure or assure the city that they're getting good pricing on execution, on sales of securities, and they're just, it's not something we're going to go without. So they're very good. They are very responsive. Their contract came due at the end of December, and we just renewed it for another 5-year term. And I am happy to answer any questions you might have about this item. Again, it's information only.
Councilmember Lawson, any questions?
I have no questions.
No questions either. Thank you for the presentation, Teresa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, Q4 2023 internal audit report.
Yes, and Cherie is going to share slides for me because I'm having some computer issues. So Michelle Crawford, City Auditor. So what I'm going to be going through today, as Cherie starts to share, is just a quick overview of our updates for the fourth quarter and just a couple updates on a couple other things. So you can go to the next slide, Cherie. We can get WebEx is so much different. All right, so while she's pulling that up, so starting with some of the overall updates, all staff did meet the required professional development hours, and that is one item that we do report on annually. That was met for our staff members. For the 2023 audit plan engagement completions, as of year end, we have 30% completion of planned engagements on citywide and 20% for police. And I'll explain those numbers a little bit more. And so these are only the 2023 numbers. We rolled several audits from 2022 into 2023, and we've rolled several audits from 2023 into the current year. I am projecting after we finish up these last 2023 audits, 67% for citywide will be completed and 40% on the police side. Additionally, in 2023, we did a software migration and audit implementation, which took some time. And additionally, we've been down one staff person for most of the year, which has impacted some of those numbers. The other item is recruitment is currently underway to fill that position of the police auditor.
Michelle, can I ask a question on that real quick? Hasn't the police auditor position been vacant for quite some time?
So we had a hire last year. We delayed a little bit as they were ending their military career. Unfortunately, that person after 7 weeks resigned. And so that was part of the delay. And then because of the holidays, I held. So interviews are actually happening this week and next week. So
Gotcha. That's a bummer. Thanks.
Yep. Additional updates for 2024, we have added a review of the Central Library cash handling procedures, and that is currently underway. And then additionally, active engagements in the fourth quarter, facilities management. We are still continuing work on that one. It was a very large engagement. We're hoping to complete most of the field work at the end of this quarter. A review of non-competitive purchase processes. This should be completed this quarter, and police property and evidence should be completed in the next 2 weeks. More specific into engagement tracking updates. So outstanding recommendations as of year end, this graphic breaks it out by department and the number of recommendations they have that are still outstanding. The information is also in the report in the backup. It just kind of gives you a different viewpoint of how many recommendations are out there by department. Additional graphic is showing how many recommendations were actually implemented in 2023. So we started the year with 80 outstanding. We added 37 recommendations, 61 were implemented, and there are 56 that remain outstanding as of year end. That is all that we have today. The next presentation will hopefully include some of those completed audits, but I am happy to answer any questions you have.
I have a couple of questions, Michelle. So on the outstanding recommendations by department, what does it mean when it says citywide?
So some of our recommendations, thinking back, a lot of those are maybe pointed more towards the culture engagement, where it's more applicable across the city rather than one department kind of owning it. And so that's what it means, is it was an engagement, maybe like a culture or something that was so broad, it wasn't a specific department. And so it's a broader ownership of it. And I believe most of those citywide ones are relating to the culture engagement from last year. And I do expect a number of those to be completed this quarter.
Gotcha. Okay. And then my next question is on the same graph or whatever, the same data. how does the number of outstanding recommendations compared to like how many they had to begin with, I guess? So like, for example, fire has 3, like where did they start?
Yeah. So in the backup in the actual internal audit report, we do include more specific detail, and it's an engagement by engagement. I don't know that I broke it out department by department. I would say the fire ones relate to older engagement. So they did start and end with those. And I know that they're working hard on a couple pieces to get those addressed. I would say police probably had the biggest update, where they started out with significantly number of ones and they've implemented a significant number this year.
Okay. And then as far as the citywide culture and engagement tracking by department, it looks like there are 2 that are still in progress. Just curious why those ones, is there any reason, or they just haven't been done yet?
So for, I believe, HR, I think that one's just pending some updates and documentation, with year-end timing and the additional things. That's kind of where that one's at. And then the public defender's office is just waiting on an update from them on what initiatives they, addressed last year. So.
Okay. And then as far as staffing in your office, obviously you need to fill the police auditor position. But otherwise, do you feel like you have sufficient, like is 3 people enough for a city our size?
So I can say comparatively, when we've looked at this as part of our audit plan and everything else, I believe Colorado Springs has around 15. They also do a utility. Denver's closer to 50, but they're a city and county. So it really varies as far as numbers. The impact our numbers have is, so Sheree, for instance, is working on the facilities engagement, has been working on it for probably close to 7-8 months. It's going to be a really long engagement having one person work on that. We're going to try to do double up, but it kind of just impacts how quickly we can get some things done. So we issue interim reports so departments are getting timely information, but it does kind of impact the number of engagements that we can do in order to do them right. We don't want to, not look at things. So that's kind of where that's at. And I can say comparatively, those are the 2 jurisdictions I know the numbers for.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. I appreciate the update.
Yep.
Councilmember Lawson, any questions?
Yes, thanks, Councilmember Gardner. Just, Michelle, so I think Councilmember Gardner asked the question I was thinking about, but with the resources that you have, and you have 56 remaining, how do you approach that for 2024 if there's more that need to be added, or what's your anticipated amount that could be added for the 2024 calendar year or fiscal year?
Yeah, so I think it depends on each audit, right? Our goal would be, we would love to go in and do an audit and not have any recommendations. But typically we're recommending the higher risk areas. So we're almost always going to have recommendations. What I will say is we've been working really hard with the departments and the deputy city managers and city managers on quarterly updates, letting everybody know where they're at. And that has really been helping. We were able to implement, I think, and get a lot of them addressed last year. And so we'll continue that approach. Some recommendations take longer, right? So when you're talking about systems or some like really big changes, those are going to naturally take longer, but other ones can go faster. And so we've been really trying to partner with the departments and city management to get those addressed quicker. So I don't know the number necessarily makes a difference versus the context, right? Update a policy versus implement a whole new policies and procedures or implement a whole new system. They're going to take different levels of time. So I'm not as concerned with the number of recommendation as departments being responsive and making good faith progress to implementing them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Gardner.
Yep. All right. Anything else, Michelle? All right. Thank you for the update. I think that's all we have on our agenda. 1 minute shy of the projected meeting time. We beat it. Look at that. Miscellaneous matters for consideration. Anything from you, Councilmember Lawson?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. And I don't know if Mayor Kaufman's still on. If Mayor Kaufman, if you have anything.
Nothing from me. Good meeting. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate everybody's time today, and we will see everyone in February. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.